Hi everyone, welcome back to Go Local Live. I'm Go Local News editor Kate Nagel. Thanks to Ray Rickman for coming in to give his big view, and thanks to my next guests, Onna, Moniz, John, and Robb Dimmick. Thank you for coming in today. I appreciate it.
You're welcome.
Thanks so much, Robb. Thank you so much. With Stages of Freedom for the current exhibit, Someone's in the Kitchen with Dinah, an exhibit of Black kitchen collectibles spanning a wide time span and also spanning the positive and negative. So let's talk a little bit. You brought a piece in here, Robb. Talk about sort of the impetus for this exhibit, the curation of it, and then we'll go into what folks can find when they go to take a look.
Well, the impetus for the exhibit was actually tied to our annual fundraiser, which is a Black culinary experience. And this year we wanted to couple that with the opening of this exhibit. All of the items coming from the extraordinary collection of Onna, Moniz, John, and her 30 years pursuit of Black memorabilia. So I wanted her to speak just a little bit about sort of her history in collecting this material and what it means to her as an African-American woman.
Okay, Onna,
Okay.
let's go back to the beginning.
Let's go back. Well, Robb says for my 30 years of collecting, I used to say 25, then 30, and now I have to say more than 50 years of collecting. Initially, it was unconscious. I was collecting because I wanted a Black doll. Believe it or not, when I grew up, nobody in my neighborhood, nobody on my street, no one had Black dolls. And that's contrary to all the studies where Black children would reject Black dolls, but I wanted a Black doll. And I couldn't find a Black doll other than a stocking doll, a rag doll, an ugly doll. I wanted a doll that kind of reflected me, my image. I wanted a doll that I could play with, comb her hair, and enjoy. So I just got out there, and the first thing I saw were the salt and pepper shakers. So I started with the salt and pepper shakers, and then as I went on, I was collecting anything by, for, or about Black people. I scoured this state, nearby Mass, anywhere I went, my eye was looking. A lot of estate sales, a lot of antique stores. Oh, I'm well known in the antique stores. And then I really became aware of what I was doing at a certain point and the impact that these images have on Black people. The very negative, I mean, the grinning, watermelon-eating figures, the lazy, shiftless image that they put out there of Black people. And I realized that this was shaping how some people viewed Black people, the Black community. So I really felt the need to display these pieces, to get out and talk about them, to have discussions. We can't go forward if we don't talk about this. Exactly. These pieces have been out there for over 200 years, and too many of them are negative. I like to start with slavery and come through the years and always end up with positive images, heroes, and the first for this, and inspiring people so that children, because we do a lot of children, we face a lot of people, leave with a positive feeling. One of my mantras is, together we can face race. And we need to do that. We have to talk about it.
So let's talk a little bit about the piece Robb has under here as part of your collection. That looks like, okay, it was tagged to his jacket. So let's talk a little bit about what you brought in with you here today.
Well, you want to say something?
No,
first?
I want you to speak
Okay.
because this is a piece that is just now being added to this exhibit because of its
significance in the collection. The piece and the exhibit is called Something's in the Kitchen with Dinah. This is Dinah. You can see her name clearly. This piece dates back to the 1890s, and they were produced all over. These things, these banks, these cast iron banks were extremely popular, not in the Black community, but they were extremely popular. Many of them were made in China. I mean, it was a lot of work. I watched this program showing the women melting iron. So much is put into these, but it was for the American market. So this is Dinah. And Dinah came after slavery, where the mammy, prior to that, the mammy, everybody loved mammy. How I love my mammy. I mean, Eddie Cantor, mammy. I did a show just a little while ago with elderly people, and when I showed them the blackface, to explain what's going on out there with blackface, the elderly people started singing when I held up Eddie Cantor and Mammy. They started singing Mammy. See, Mammy was loving, warm. She was that, feeling that everyone had. She took care of the house. She cleaned the children, dressed the children. But after that, things turned. After the Civil War and things got ugly, and the images got ugly and reflected that feeling. Now, if you look at Dinah, I mean, she's a very, shall we say, unattractive woman. That is not the image of most black people. I want to think I don't look like Dinah.
Well,
And
she's not there's no femininity to her.
No
other
femininity.
than her,
That's perfect.
her bosom.
Exactly.
And the whole notion of desexualizing black people.
Black
through
women in
these images.
particular.
And I mean, here we have, this is a cast iron bank in which if you press the lever at the back of her arm, she will actually eat
the
a coin.
coins.
So that in itself is incredibly demeaning and disturbing.
Additionally, the eyes roll. And it's to put fear. Dinah's designed to put fear. You need to fear Dinah. She's not the friendly, warm Mammy. You don't want Dinah in your kitchen.
But at the same time, I mean, white people were collecting these items
Oh, absolutely.
as a sort of form of pleasure. One, it harkens back to the days of slavery and as we move into Reconstruction, where white children were raised in the South by black mammies, by black women. And so there's a kind of comfort for them in having these items on their dining room tables or in their kitchen, but at the same time, they are keeping black people in their place because they have dehumanized them. Would you agree with that?
Oh, yeah, I agree with it. And if you notice, many of the pieces are about cotton and Dixie. Bring that back. Let's go back to the old times of Dixie. I can remember cartoons where you'd have cartoon characters singing Dixie. I want to go back to Dixie. Like cotton was a great thing. And they have this love affair with cotton, while at the same time, slaves were laboring 14, 16 hours a day. Picking cotton is not easy. It's not fun. And no one really wants to go back to it. It was romanticized by the songs, by the cartoons, but not by the black people.
Now, I know that one of the things that was mentioned about this exhibit, too, specifically because it's someone's in the kitchen with Dinah looking at black kitchen collectibles, the imagery of the black woman on products, whether it was cream of wheat or Aunt Jemima. Let's talk a little bit about that as well and what you might have in your collection.
Well, we have many mammies. I have hundreds of mammies, I'm going to say, because Mammy was, again, that loving figure. And Aunt Jemima was a loving figure. The name Jemima actually came from a minstrel song, the Mills Brothers, and they produced they bought rights to the pancake mix. And the pancake mix was one of the very first prepackaged foods in America. And it became very popular. At one point, Anne Green was representing, she was the face on the Aunt Jemima box. If you look at the early pictures of Jemima, Aunt Jemima, she was very, very black, pitch black with a turban, kind of a flat face. And then the pitch blackness moved on. The turban came off, and the kerchief went on. The kerchief came off, and then a small scarf, then a headband. And, through the turbulent times of the 60s, Aunt Jemima, kind of went underground. She was very quiet. You didn't see her. And then Aunt Jemima returned, and she came back. She had a perm. The headbands were gone. She had a pearl earring. She was brown, and she was beautiful. She was what a black woman would look like. But if you look back, through the years, on and on and on, you see the evolution from this image to a beautiful, if you look at the pancake box, say, Aunt Jemima's beautiful. And you'd say, what's wrong with that?
So you mentioned it just previously, too, with what we've seen in current context today and the issue of blackface still at the forefront by lieu of certain leaders having been exposed to be wearing it back, as they said, as back in the 80s. Let's talk a little bit about this. Again, as we're here, it is 2019. There's this exhibit that shows, again, this full spectrum of black Americana, if you will. How important is this exhibit in the realm, and you have talked about this, in the broader discussions of race and looking back both at the usage of blackface and concurrently as it's placed now in current conversation and debate?
Well, blackface is very important, and we need to talk about it. People keep saying, what's so bad? What is wrong? Blackface goes all the way back to slavery. Blackface goes back to these images. Blackface, and again, it turned out to be the minstrel shows. Black men could not do minstrel shows. Only white people did. It goes back to Jim Crow, where blackface is put on, and you would have a white person putting on blackface, putting on white around their lips, and dance and pretend to be a black person, act like they were a black person, and doing these crazy kinds of shows. But they got big, and minstrel shows were huge. It was a very lucrative way to make money. There was a lot of money, but blackface goes all the way back to slavery, to the Jim Crow era, to these negative images, and we have people that we love or look at and really want. I mean, just think of Ted Danson broke out with blackface, and we really liked him, and he did not see, or he said he didn't see the harm. I mean, right now in Virginia, right now with the governor, he didn't see the harm, and that was in 1980. I read an article in Barrington just a few months ago I'm saying 2 years ago, I believe it was, with the school children, with their teacher, put on blackface and did a show. That image is not going away. People have to understand that it's painful. It's painful to black people. It takes you right back to segregation. It takes you back to Jim Crow. It takes you back to the minstrel shows, making fun of black people.
Yeah, and one of the things about minstrelsy, which then moves into vaudeville, and
Exactly.
as you move into vaudeville, black vaudevillians actually had to, in many cases, to actually use blackface to make a living, so that they're actually lampooning themselves. It's a really curious, sort of dichotomy.
It is.
And then the whole idea of minstrelsy and blackface goes right through to the probably the mid-'70s, where male organizations would use them as fundraisers for their organization. So this is alive and well, and obviously what's happening in Virginia makes it very evident that this is not a dead issue.
Yeah. And it's not just Virginia. I have one piece in my
clearly.
collection of a lumberjack, and it's blackface. It's a little character made out of wood, and his arms and legs bend, and he was given to me. A gentleman called me up and said, I think I have something you might want for your collection. And he brought it to me with a note telling me that his uncle did minstrel shows in Warren, Rhode Island. Now, I live in East Providence. I did a lot of my scouring and antiquing in Warren, Rhode Island. And he gives me this piece. And he says when his uncle did his minstrel shows in Warren, he would have the little guy with him. And as he's telling blackface jokes, the guy would be dancing, his arms are swinging, and this is right here.
Right here.
It's in the north, it's
yeah,
in our face,
absolutely.
it's in Rhode Island.
Absolutely. I mean, people come into the exhibit and say, my grandmother had those salt shakers on the table. It was just something, they were ubiquitous. And we need to be clear, because there just was a piece on PBS where they are still manufacturing these items. In many cases, they're trying to manufacture them so that people who are not in the know or not savvy are buying things that they think are
That's right.
original. This is an original
That's
piece.
real.
And you have to know how to sort of read it, the rust, the wear.
Screw in the back.
But there are attempts to reproduce these things so that they appear that they're old. But these things are still being made in Japan, in China, and in Germany to this
And
very
they're made
day.
mostly for the U.S. market.
Oh, yeah.
And there is a market, or they wouldn't be producing them.
And what's your thought about that they're still producing this in this day and age?
It's scary. It's scary because most of the images that are being reproduced are negative. They're not the pretty images. I told you I originally started because I wanted a doll. And I think about it. I have grandchildren, and they all want their American Girl dolls. And I know you're going to be familiar with the American Girl dolls. And there's one called Addie.
Yes.
And Addie was the first black doll that American Girl produced. And I believe that was in 1993. And they were extremely careful They were diligent. They did their homework. They sat around tables and decided what her story would be, what her book would be. And it was about a little black child trying to get free for slavery, her family. So they put that much into it, which is so good and so great and what we want. And then on the other hand, you have these negative images still being produced.
Well, you can see all of this and more with Stages of Freedom putting on Someone's in the Kitchen with Dinah and Onna, Moniz, John, and Robb Dimmick. I so appreciate your taking the time to come in.
Thank you so much.
Tell us more about the exhibit, and we'll be putting up links if you catch this after the fact for more on the exhibit. So thank you for tuning in for this portion of the segment, but don't go anywhere. We're going to be right back here in just a moment.